Welcome to the Edges of Lean. I'm Bella Engelbach, and in this podcast we explore the human and creative side of lean thinking, unusual places where lean thinking is practiced. We meet people who are practicing continuous improvement in many different flavors and styles. So come along with me on a journey to the edges of lean. Episode 46, Continuous Improvement at the End of Boring PowerPoint with Betsy Lawson. After barely surviving the 212 mind-numbing PowerPoint presentation, Betsy Lawson vowed to find a better way that would prevent this pain and suffering amongst all humans. So she took her Lean Six Sigma Green Belt, ATD Training Certificate, 2 experiences of performing stand-up comedy in New York City, and a general lack of fear, and channeled them into the development of lean edutainment for her workplace. Her master's degree from the University of Virginia in urban and environmental planning and extensive experience in affordable housing have nothing to do with her current role of process improvement coach at Augusta Health in Fisherville, Virginia. Betsy Lawson, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thank you, Bella.
It's really fun to have you here today, and I'm very excited about what you're going to talk about. But first, let's find out who Betsy is. Tell us a little bit about Betsy, what you do now, and how you got to do what you're doing.
Well, as of right now, I am a performance improvement coach at Augusta Health in Fishersville, Virginia. My journey of lean started when I was in New York City working in affordable housing. We were building a new project management system, and I became part of the team that was developing the user stories, and we were using Agile, and lean was a part of that. So short story short.
Wow. So you came in really through the project management route. So that's interesting.
Yeah, business analyst. Yeah. Project management, business analyst.
Cool. So, and you're at Augusta Health now.
Yes.
So, and you have this passion to prevent boring PowerPoint. So tell me about how much boring PowerPoint have you seen in your life?
Too many, too much. I sat through something incredibly boring on Friday, and it reiterated how important it is to not do that, to not subject people to that. There's no need, really. It's not, it shouldn't be painful. It shouldn't be awful. I feel that everybody has endured boring PowerPoints. And in fact, most of the presentations that they've sat through have probably been less than enthralling, less interesting than their favorite movie.
Well, we do in our profession, we use a lot of PowerPoint, and especially in training, right? So it seems to be the way that we want to get points across. So what are you doing, Betsy, to improve this? So this is all about continuous improvement. What are you doing to improve PowerPoint?
Well, it started when I was at UVA, the job prior to the one I have now. We were building a RACI training, and I was on the team that was tasked with building the story for it and the animations and the PowerPoint. And we decided to use names that were familiar. One of the biggest problems with conventional PowerPoints is that when people are using an example, they just make up names. And so in addition to asking people to remember new concepts and new processes, you're also asking them to remember these fake names and relationships that are not really important, that they don't need to remember afterwards. So in order to avoid that, we decided to name the characters something that, I know those characters. I don't have to be like, who, wait, what? So our main characters were Lucy and Desi and Fred and Ethel. And then also on the training team, the fun team, we had Sally, Jesse, Sam and Libby, and then we had a fun trainer named Raphael. So people of a certain generation will instantly know who those people are. And everybody should know who Lucy and Desi are, and Ricky.
Yeah, and that's probably cross-cultural too. I think I Love Lucy, right, is probably known pretty much, I would say, at least in the Western Hemisphere and probably other parts of the world as well. I mean, just that it's so classic. So you said something that I think is really important that had never occurred to me before you said it, Betsy, which is that when you are giving an example, you're really asking people to remember two things: this new information that you're giving them, and you're asking them to remember the characters and the plot of this story that you've made up. Or it may even be a story from a previous situation. It may be a real situation, but it's people that they don't know, right? And wow, when you said that, I was like, oh my goodness, how many times have I done that in training? I love to use stories and examples in training, but perhaps, in order to preserve people's anonymity or something, I don't use real names. I don't use characters that people can identify with. And so that's so true. You're really asking them to do two things at once, or maybe even three things at once, if you're asking them to remember character, plot, and this thing like a racy that you're teaching them. Wow. So what was the impact when you did that, when you named your characters familiar names?
It became, well, the presentation became our most popular, most requested training. We would give it for, our group, our larger group that we were part of, and then people would hear about it. We get requests from different areas in the school, these different, and it was surprising. We're like, okay, and it was very popular. And I think one of the, in addition to the chocolate bar that people got at the end of it, that had a racy wrapper on it to help remember, we had a very good exercise that people would do, and that was also done with familiar names. And we encourage people to take on those roles and use those roles to help fill out the racy chart.
Wow, that's amazing. I just can't even imagine people actually requesting racy training. I mean, because usually, you say racy and people go, oh, yeah. So that was a huge triumph. So where did you go from there then?
So from there, we decided to redo most of, actually all of our other trainings, the Lean 101s, Lean 102, A3, trying to think of others. And what we did for the Lean 101s, and this is another thing that has been very helpful, is that we can give the whole thing in an hour and a half, but that's not it's a lot. So we broke them up into micro trainings. So we recorded them into these different segments. We would chunk them, presenting 2 or 3 concepts. And then if you run it, well, once you record it, then you know how long it is. But if you want to get an estimate, this is something that's so helpful for convincing people that it's not going to be a lot of time. You take what you're going to say, you take your script, and you go to scripttimer.com and you paste it in, and it'll tell you how long it will be. 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And then you can say, we have a 4-minute video we'd like you to watch before we get it started with this project. And so they're little, they're very short. So it's not a big time commitment. And hopefully once they watch one, they'll be, oh, this is fun. And they'll watch the others.
Wow. And I'm I'm thinking about the, what you said about A3 training. So A3 training, it really is character driven, right? When you think about A3s, there's the coach and there's the learner, right? So you sort of have 2 characters in there. And I'm just thinking there's so many possibilities then you could do with those relationships, with the relationships that people already understand.
Right.
instead of being, having it being extremely abstract. Because even John Shook's book, you've got to get to learn the characters before you can really understand what's happening in the book, which is why I think a lot of people read the book and still think it's about just filling out a form instead of that coach-learner relationship, because of that work you have to do understanding the characters. This is really cool, Betsy. I mean, I think you've come up with something really great. So
really quickly about the A3, you're right about it having to be a story. And so what we did is I racked my brain for weeks about what is a story that everybody knows. We had done a PDCA training and used JAWS for that, which is pretty universal in terms of movies, but what is a story that everybody knows? And I came to the conclusion that Cinderella, it's been around for over 2,000 years. It's been present in one form or another in all of the cultures around the world. So it was perfect. And we used the Walt Disney example format for presenting it. And so that was our character-driven story to support the A3.
So is it Cinderella's A3? Who is the owner of the A3?
It's called Cindy's A3, Making Dreams Come True Through Problem Solving.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Wow. I love it. That's great. That's great. And tell me a little bit about the PDCA training with Jaws. I mean, what I can remember from Jaws is that's the movie that made me hate swimming in the ocean. And I think we need a bigger boat, which is, definitely the result of a PDCA cycle, right? Right there. But how did you align Jaws and PDCA training?
Well, we were looking for a story that had a project manager, had a problem cycle, and had all these important characters in it. And we settled on it. Ocean's 11 was a contender, but we decided on Jaws, and it worked. It worked. We need a bigger boat. We use that as an opportunity to talk about metrics. And do you have the right shark? You got to measure the bite radius. Metrics as well. But yeah, it was something that we managed to really make it come to life.
But I can imagine for the training team, right? For the you and the folks who are developing the training, that it was also fun.
Yes. It is so much fun developing these things. It's a chance to be creative in terms of finding the right images, finding the right sounds, writing the script, getting all the clicks to line up with the different pictures. And that's another thing, is that there's a lot of animations in these trainings. This is why I keep using the word script, because when you click on before a certain word, then this image pops up that's directly related to it. And 3 words later, you click again, and it's a different image. So that is, that's really the crux of this. Is we're trying to get people's attention. We're trying to engage them in a way that they're engaged when they are listening to their favorite song or watching a movie or watching TikTok. We want to engage them. So the more interesting we can make it, the better chance we have of it going into their long-term memory. And part of deep processing, and a big part of that is if they can relate to it, if they can make it personal. So if I'm showing an image that they know, if I'm talking about a storage that they know, then it's personal, and they have a much better chance of being able to recall that information later on. And that's what it's all about, is we're trying to teach people and get them to remember it and use it. And so what do we have to do to do that? And that's where this edutainment concept comes in. I didn't make that word up. It's an actual thing. It's used primarily in primary education. And you have to have no shame also in order to do this.
You have to have no shame.
No shame. It's very important. You have to just do whatever it takes, as it's not illegal or immoral, to get people's attention and to teach these concepts. The last video I made, my colleague helped me with the lyrics, and we ended up putting Nat King Cole's LOVE song to talk about the 8 types of waste. So instead of L, D is for those errors in, or D is for those darn errors in emails. And I recorded myself singing this. And it's,
that's a tune, right? That a lot of people have in their head. Maybe their parents played it, or their grandparents played it, or they hear on a commercial or something, and the tune's already in their head. They don't have to learn the tune. Now they're just associating it with some other words.
Yes.
Very, very cool.
And in a way, it's my goal to, I don't want to say ruin their current association with, or current relationship with something. But yeah, when they hear the Beatles, it's getting better all the time, I want them to think of continuous improvement. So that song is on the training playlist that they can access on Spotify or YouTube. We're right now, my next goal is to measure how successful we are. And that's something that we haven't been able to do as much as I would like because COVID. The focus has been on that, not necessarily getting everybody trained. So
that's great. So tell us about the Spotify playlist, because that's available to everyone, right? If you listen to the podcast, even if you don't listen to the podcast, but you won't know about it if you don't listen to this podcast, Betsy has a training playlist. So tell us about that.
There are playlists for each of the trainings that we have. We have a training for Darcy. We've changed the RACI to Darcy. We have it for Cindy's A3. We have it for Lean 101. And it can be fun to listen to these songs and be like, how does this relate? And then you maybe listen to the song again and you hear that little phrase in the song. You're like, oh, that's where it is.
That's great. That's great. So we're going to share at least one of those Spotify playlists in the show notes for this podcast. So check that out. And maybe you can use some of those in your own training. That's so cool. Wow, Betsy. So one of the things that strikes me, okay, so you started out in your career as a business analyst doing project management. And now as a lean continuous improvement professional, you are doing all of this creative stuff. Now, were you sort of creative in this way all along, but it was just something you didn't do at work? Or are these skills that you developed as you recognize the need?
A little bit of both. I've always been identified as a creative person, as actually a designer, and I never really had a creative job up until recently. I was really lucky that one of my former bosses, Olga Kipnis, she recognized that I had this creative streak, and so she put me in these roles or on these projects to where I had to learn something new. I had to grow as a creative individual, and so then I gained these skills that enabled me to. All right, we're going to make a PowerPoint presentation. We're going to record it. We're going to edit it. I use Camtasia to record and edit. It's an easy software. I tried to learn the Adobe one, and that was
same. No disrespect to Adobe, but for those of us who really, need to drive a Volkswagen, Adobe is pretty much a high-speed Jaguar, and we don't need that. Right? Yeah. Camtasia is very helpful.
Yes. Yeah. One thing I'd like to mention about these training videos, if you decide to do similar videos, note that in terms of copyright, these videos will never see the light of day. Like, I will never see it at a conference because you will never see any of my videos at a conference because Disney is not sponsoring me. So this is something that is for internal use only.
Right. Yeah. So that's a really important watch out when you are borrowing things that are copyrighted by other people. Make sure that you are following all of your organization's rules for fair use of copyright, and that you're not, because we don't want to steal. Right. Stealing is not what we want to do. But a story like Cinderella, which you said it has been around for in many cultures for thousands of years. Even Disney started with that story, right? They took it to another level. Yeah. So as a creative person, and you have Olga who recognize your creativity and give you opportunities to develop it. What would be your advice for organizations that want to, do more of this kind of work, but are kind of looking at perhaps the continuous improvement stuff, or, the people who are making the training stuff, and finding that they are people who are not necessarily all that creative?
Yeah. Well, hire creative people.
Creative people.
That's pretty much it. And if you hire somebody who is really creative, like they have an MFA or they have a background in photography or, art or filmmaking, they can create original content that is interesting and fun. And that's when you can present that at a conference too, because that's something that's been created from scratch in-house.
Right. Is owned by the company. Yeah. So that's interesting as people are thinking about hiring. And I think everybody's trying to hire right now, thinking about hiring, and you're looking at somebody's CV and you see that what they went to school for is not what they're doing now. Maybe what they went to school for is what you really need. Right.
Exactly.
That's, don't look at it and say, well, they didn't start out as an engineer. Well, maybe you need that arts degree or that creative writing degree. That is maybe exactly what you need to spur your organization forward. Because it takes all types to make this happen. Betsy, when you and I talked earlier, you told me something that I thought was really cool, was that you've also done stand-up. So tell me about Betsy doing stand-up.
When I was in New York, I decided that, I can do that. And I use humor to deal with stress too. I make up little jokes and then I tell them to the other people and, around me who are experiencing a similar situation, and it helps. It diffuses that stress. And if you put those things together, you have a skit, you have a stand-up routine. In New York, also, there was so much stimulation, so many interesting things, so many funny and weird things. And being there by myself, I didn't have a lot of people to share them with. So I'd be writing them down, I'd be remembering them and then writing them down later. And then I had a stand-up routine. And it was encouraging, because I tell my friends, like, oh my gosh, I saw this. And they'd start laughing. They say, you should do stand-up. And I'm like, no. And then one day I'm like, okay. And so I had a lot of material, and it was terrifying. The first time,
oh my gosh.
Terrifying. Yeah. First time actually went really well. I ended up really enjoying myself. The second time it was exactly the opposite. People weren't laughing, and it took me about 6 months to watch the video, because when you go to some of these, they record you and you can watch it later. And I realized that my jokes had gone exactly the way I had hoped. My jokes were funny, but my audience, I didn't keep in mind the customer, the mind of the customer. They were laughing at the dirty jokes. They were laughing at like the smart, clever jokes. They're kind of stupid too. And so I realized, like, it wasn't my jokes. It wasn't my delivery. It was my audience. I just didn't have material that they liked. So the lesson from that is, who's your customer? Know your customer. That's the lean lesson.
I love it. And it certainly, I think, must have prepared you then, as you said, for being fearless when you're working on training, right? You've already stood up in front of what might be a hostile audience in New York City doing stand-up. So there's no way that some healthcare providers in a training in Augusta, Georgia, are going to do you any damage at all. You've already faced the worst.
As long as they don't throw tomatoes, we're good.
Don't let them bring tomatoes in the room. That's one of the basic rules of training. Wow. Wow. So I'd love to talk just for a moment about, we're coming out of COVID. Hopefully we are coming out of COVID. So much of certainly healthcare organizations have been focused on COVID, just getting through COVID. There's been a lot of turnover, a lot of issues with staffing. And now you're saying you're able to get back to training. How are people being receptive to the idea of improvement at this point?
Yes, when we are contacted, we're contacted by people who want our help, who want our assistance on a project. It's usually process improvement. Sometimes it's something larger. So they're coming to us and they are receptive because they realize that they want to make things better. They want things to go as smoothly as possible. And in terms of being receptive, we don't do your typical come to the training and then we'll start this project. Some people are allergic to the word training. They're allergic to the word education. And so I was talking about those micro chunks, the concepts. And we use we use A3s, and for the A3, we chunk that as well. And so I present it as an introduction. I have the agenda, and the agenda has an introduction to the team members, an introduction to the format of an A3. And I say it as, we need to all be on the same page. We need to all be speaking the same language. And so when I'm talking about certain things, I want you to know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to give this little introduction. It's 3 minutes long, and then we will get started. And I did that for each section. So they got the entire A3 training through these introductions. Sneaky, huh?
They were all introductions. They never had to do the full training.
We never used the T word.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And then who coaches those A3s? Do they coach each other? Do you coach them?
Right. So we come in as the facilitator and as the coach. And we walk them through it. And once everybody knows how to, keep everybody on track. And once people know how to do things, it's just a matter of wind up and watch them go. It's amazing. To see them.
Wow. Yeah. And then they have that marvelous moment where they actually see something improve, and then they're very excited. So you're just taking them along in little tiny steps to get to that point.
Exactly.
Very nice. Very nice. So what's next, Betsy? What do you think? What are you going to work on next?
I am hoping to do more projects and to be able to improve, to measure how well people remember these things. So at the end of a project, what I'm planning on doing is giving a little quiz. And Mentometer is the way to do the quizzes. You do these fun things and you put in silly words, but you want to see how well they remember things, how well they can recall. Right now it's going to be metrics, and in terms of what everything else looks like next, that is above my pay grade.
Right. I'm just thinking, what's next for you in terms of how, yeah. Well, using the Mentometer, that's something else we can put in the show notes. Using Mentometer for the quizzes would make the quizzes not seem like, oh gosh, Betsy's giving us a quiz.
Right. If you're going to quiz them on who are the founders of Lean, put Morimoto in there, the famous sushi chef from New York. Right. Yeah. I've actually had people select that. And I'm like, okay, we need to do this again.
Right. Well, that's probably not the most important thing for them to remember about Lean. I mean, there are more important things to remember than who the founders are. But I love that. And then you could just have this vision of, actually, if you think about it, Morimoto runs a very lean kitchen. So maybe they're right.
I imagine most kitchens are.
Yeah. I took my team to visit a high-end restaurant kitchen once, and the standard work was astonishing, really astonishing, really. I mean, gosh, the speed, everything was amazing, and the food was delicious too. Yeah. It's a good trip. Yeah. Wow, Betsy, this is great.
Thank you, Bella.
So tell me, as you are thinking about this and moving this forward, what would be your vision for how people deliver training in the future?
My vision for how people deliver training in the future is that there's no more clip art. There are no more stock photos. I've seen some of the same stock photos in multiple presentations. None of that. Trainings of the future. I wish they would care about the audience enough to make it entertaining.
Yeah. I totally get that. Yeah. And when you think about how do we get most of our information today? If I want to learn how to do something, I go to YouTube.
Yep.
Yeah. And if I look at the videos that explain how to do something and they're more than that magic 3.5 minutes, I don't pick those ones, right? I pick the ones that are short and sweet. Yeah. I can see an organization having a YouTube channel, right? Their own internal YouTube channel. I mean,
Yep.
this is how you, I don't know. This is how you discharge a patient, right? You could have that all in one YouTube video.
Usually there's an intranet. A lot of times it's SharePoint and the videos are just up on there. Which, as long as people can get to them.
Yep. And they're accurate and up to date.
Yep.
Yeah. So cool. That's great. So Betsy, tell me, thinking about your career, where you started and where you are now, what would be your piece of advice for a young person starting out in their career?
For starting out in your career, get your Lean Six Sigma certification, whether that's a green belt, black belt. If you like math, go for the black belt immediately. It's just more math. That's my biggest piece of advice is get that certification. It'll open more doors.
Wow, great advice. And I would guess also use your creative skills. Use all of your skills, not just the ones that they want you to at work. Yeah, and find a boss like Olga.
Yes.
It's all about the manager.
Yeah.
Wow. And Betsy, could you just also let us know, how can people find you if they want to discuss more about this?
They can email me at lawsonbetsy@gmail. LAWSONBETSY.
Okay, that's great. And you're on LinkedIn.
Yes.
And if you are a member of the Women in Lean Hour table, as many of the listeners are, Betsy's a member. So, you can check her out there as well. So, and I hope you'll share some of this in upcoming Women in Lean events. That would be very, very nice to see.
Absolutely.
And
one thing I forgot to, and this is like a little one-off, I'm sorry. If you're going to be doing trainings like this and you can't do a story, word associations. You're going to have to do a lot of word associations. If you're teaching the concept of flow, I put up a picture of flow from Progressive Insurance. And then I put up a picture of peace flowing like a river. And then I introduced, and then I gave the definition. So you're going to have to find those word associations. It even sounds like, not just double meanings.
Yeah, and there's a neuroscience reason that works, and that's because as adults, all of our memories and learning are basically stored like books on a bookshelf, and we connect things to objects that are already on our mental bookshelves. If you try to teach somebody something that they have no shelf for and no like object, it's very, very difficult. Kids can do that. Adults can't. So those associations, that's brilliant, Betsy. Thanks for bringing that up. And check out the show notes for the Spotify playlist, and check out Betsy, have a conversation with her, learn something from her. Thank you, Betsy Lawson, for joining me at the Edges of Lean.
Thank you, Dawn.
This is Bella Engelbach, and I'd like to thank Betsy Lawson for being my guest on The Edges of Lean. How do you make training fun and effective? We'd love to hear from you. Email Betsy at lawsonbetsy@gmail.com or find her on LinkedIn and start a conversation. Find me at leanforhumans.com or on LinkedIn, or comment wherever you watch or listen. And tell a friend about The Edges of Lean. Please join me in exploring more of The Edges of Lean. There's a lot to learn. And check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com. You'll find more podcasts and videos with lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelbach with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.